And Steve, while we're waiting for folks to chime in on that, let's go ahead and move on to the next question. I know that you speak to a lot of clients. When I see you at shows, you're always talking to people about their challenges and how they're dealing with them. And you hear concerns about clinical trials and the technologies involved with them. So while we're waiting for the results to be tallied, can you share with us some of those challenges with existing clinical technology and EDC systems?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. And there's a lot of challenges with them. So, some of it has to do with the fact that there's so many systems. So the first thing that you have to think of if you're a pharma company trying to put up a clinical trial is, what do you have to do to make that protocol come to life? What data has to be collected? How does it have to be collected? What's the best way to collect it? How do you randomize? What are your study arms going to be? And then all the logistic involved that are outside the systems in terms of delivering clinical supplies and everything. And so it's a big challenge for any pharmaceutical company or CRO for that matter to put all these things together and get these trials up and running. So one of the first things that I think people will have trouble with today is the time it takes to build a trial. Like, how many weeks prior to first patient in do you need to have the various systems up and running? You need your randomization system up, before the first patient walks in the door. You need your EDC data collection system up early. And so stitching all this together and the time it takes to build has been a huge challenge forever, even before trials got more as complicated as they are. I think it's been one of the bigger challenges that our customers face. The second part is the kind of data that's coming in. So as I said in my history lesson in the beginning, 85% of the data was in forms. Now it's about 15% of the data. And data is coming from absolutely everywhere right now. And it's putting an incredible burden on people to use these systems that are in place now. And it's very hard to get all the data organized when you're trying to push it through an EDC system and all these other systems that exist. So we start to think about three different areas that come to mind when you want to think about the biggest challenges. I tried to break it down into three important areas. And the first one is the way that the clinical trials are operated today. If you look at a clinical trial today versus what it was 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, or a few years ago, as you said in your opening comments, they're very different. So virtual hybrid has been, people have been talking about it forever. I think, it's becoming accelerated now for obvious reasons. There's a lot of devices that are in play now, and data is now coming from endpoint data is being collected in diaries, endpoint data is collected in devices, and that's a whole new set of challenges because you don't have the backup paper that you did before. So it's a whole new set of challenges that are in there. And then, like I mentioned in the history, EHR data is starting to become real in terms of multiple uses, and that needs to be integrated in a good way. So it's really one of the bigger challenges they have is how to take a look at that and incorporate it into the systems that they're trying to operate. The second area is these systems, and there's more than just EDC that they have, are hard to operate. The technology gets old. In the world of software, 1-year-old technology is pretty old, let alone 2 or 3 years. Clinical trials run much longer than that in many cases. So keeping these systems up to date is very, very difficult. Having the integrations between the systems is a big burden on top of a lot of these customers. And there's all kinds of IT statistics on how much money these IT departments spend on maintenance and integration, and it tends to be somewhere about between 70 and 85% of the total IT budget is just maintaining these things. And the clinical systems are no different, even though most of them operate in the cloud. There's also a huge burden of validation, and it's I talk to customers. The amount of time it takes for them to validate a new release or an upgraded release or a new piece of software is enormous, and it's a huge challenge when it comes to operating these systems and keeping them up to date and running your clinical trials and processing your portfolio. And then the other interesting thing that I've noticed is these systems have been consumed as point solutions. So the companies go out and they look for a randomization and drug supply system or a randomization drug supply vendor, and they compare the features and functions of each of the systems can you do minimization? Can you have unblinded pharmacists? Can you, how do you handle your depots within EDC? There's all kinds of things on what does your rule language look like, and how can your data be represented in different formats? And they're doing these feature function comparisons between individual point systems to try to figure out the best EDC or the best RTSM or the best data management solution. And it's very hard to figure out how to do that in terms of selecting these systems, because the truth is that when you have a clinical trial and you just want to put up a clinical trial that has certain characteristics, you're not thinking about the systems as much as you're thinking about the functions that clinical trial requires. And the way that the vendors have operated, including Oracle and Phase 4 before that, we offer these point solutions that people have to consume and then take their protocols and put them against that and figure out how to operate them. So it's been an interesting time for the customers and what they are going through. I think it's time for the industry to rethink that and try to take the burden off of the customers and let them focus on unmet medical needs and not system maintenance and integration like has been going on up till now.
And do you see that transformation taking place, or is that something that you think is still slowly coming to the industry?
So I think the transformation is taking place in that. I promised this wouldn't be a sales pitch, but I think there's new technology being developed that breaks down the barriers between these systems and lets people think about capabilities versus systems. And it's a platform. Think of a platform that just has a million functions in it, and you kind of pick and choose off of the functions on what you need to run your specific trial, rather than figuring out which systems to run that trial. And it's just much more of an elegant way of allowing customers to process their portfolio without having to worry about this vendor's going to build this part for me, this vendor's going to be built this far for me, I need to collect both pieces of data in the same place. It becomes a very, by thinking about the technology as a unified platform with capabilities as opposed to point systems with features and functions, this starts to break down. I do think the software part of the industry is moving in that direction. And I think the customers will realize over time that it's a better way of operating. Like any change within pharmaceutical, it takes a while. There are systems and processes and people that have built up over the years for good reason to make sure the data is reliable and you're not making life and death decisions with the wrong data that was collected in the wrong way. But I think over time, people will see that there's a better way of fielding the systems and let the pharmaceutical companies do their jobs in a better way.